Hello and welcome to another episode of Casual Friday. I'm here with the Duck. As always, the show is brought to you by Woo. Links available in the description below. It's been a fun time in the market, Don, but I would like to take a moment to remind people that you are a fraud who pretended to retire in order to garner sympathy, did this whole emotional think piece about the state of the industry and meme coins, etc. Fake
Did I?
retired for like 2 days, and now you're fully back in the trenches, swinging it on absolutely everything. So I
Uh,
just want the record to reflect that you are a dishonest person whose word is not to be trusted.
no. I mean, all of what I said was just a meme and was never true to begin with.
It was just a
Um,
prank.
just a prank, bro. No, I honestly still would say that I'm mostly retired. I'm just having some like vacation fun. This is not gonna be long term, like me trading like this.
And what does trading like this entail? Because you also tweeted this morning that you've never traded so poorly but still made money. That's like a quintessential Don humble flex. Like, oh my god, I'm so stupid, but hey, I still made money. Just so everyone knows, I haven't lost any money because I'm really good at this.
Oh no,
The
I
humble
mean this
brag.
this is 0% skill. It's just I picked the right thing, right? So I mean I've been shilling XRP for the last I don't know like 3 or 4 days.
Yes.
Um, and that's the coin that's up the most, pretty much. And that's the main coin I've been trading. So I should be up infinite, right? But I've managed to lose money on other things. And just generally, like every time I go to bed and wake up, I wake up poorer for some reason, but the market's still exactly where it was. So like that's like I've just not traded that well. I picked the right coin, and yeah, that's pretty much it.
What part of it has
Which
been dodgy? Is it over managing? Is it rotating? Is it coin
no,
selection? Holding period?
basically my problem is that I think we have like two scenarios that both make a lot of sense to me. And I
Okay.
fucking hate that situation. One is like especially like in the last day or so, last 2 days, where we had like a bigger sized pullback on Bitcoin. I could tell that a lot of people were like stuck in altcoins basically, and the altcoins didn't go up when Bitcoin went up, and then you get a Bitcoin pullback. Like that's the perfect recipe for like the altcoin market to just take a massive hit, right? Like you get a massive leverage wipeout, everyone gets fucked. Um, but also you want to have altcoin exposure, right? In the current market, given that like I think everyone kind of assumes that like retail is gonna jump back in, it's gonna do dumb shit like they've always had, like whenever we've made a significant new all-time high. So it's kind of like this thing where you want to have exposure to altcoins, but you also expect like a massive leverage nuke, and you don't want to be the leverage that gets nuked, right? But you also want to have exposure, and therefore you're kind of stuck in a between a rock and a hard place where you have to make a choice whether you want to have the altcoin exposure with the risk. Sorry about that.
I
Someone's
was gonna
calling
say,
me.
mate, if that goes off one more time, I'm reaching through the monitor and strangling you.
Yeah,
It's
it's
almost as bad as my fucking beeping alarm for the entire episode a couple of
no,
weeks ago,
no.
if you
And
remember
the
that.
worst part is that like it's on my second computer, so I can go. But I hope this ends. It's actually just some random spammer sending me dumb shits. But I would have to get up
Hey,
to
if it's a
close it.
KOL round, just forward it to me. I'll take care of it.
Yeah, but anyway, like it's basically like that. So I've kind of like tried to be as aggressive as I could be while being defensive enough to not get like caught with my pants down, and that combination just doesn't really work. Therefore, like I just like I could have managed the trades much better. Like that's the problem when you have like two scenarios where it's just kind of like um that are opposite to each other. Something that we talk about a lot, where it's like those are the worst times to trade if you're like not sure which one is gonna win out. Um, and yeah, I got bailed out by having, like I said, the right coin that I traded. XRP's up infinite, so I'm still up. Um, and I mean the rest is kind of like scratches, but still it's annoying because it's basically bad trading, right? Like and I you can clearly tell when you're trading poorly, even if you're making money. Like it's pretty obvious. Like it's the same with poker players, right? When they play poker and someone like a poker player wins, and they're like, "But I played so fucking dumb. Like this was just bad bad playing and it got lucky. And that's kind of how I feel like right now. And it pisses me off. Like, I don't like it. Because usually, like, I'm more happy with trading well and losing money than I am with trading this fucking poorly. Still making money, but just fumbling a bunch. So yeah, that's kind of the backstory to that. Especially since, like, at the end of the day, I actually posted the perfect hedges on Twitter before, like, where I was like, hey, you can trade like XRP and ADA and just hedge it with Solana and ETH shorts. And that trade moved like 15-20%. And that is very well positioned for like some scenario like that where the market takes a wipeout, right? Because you still have exposure because you kind of have like the dumb coins, and that's exposure to retail mania, but you also have like downside protection. So if I just put those trades on instead of trying to be even more fancy than that, I would have made much more money.
What a good problem to have, Don, realistically.
Yeah, I mean, that's the cool part about like raging bull markets, right? Where you're like, dude, I'm such a fucking moron. I don't know how I'm up this much. And I mean, that's just how the market goes right now. But that's going to end relatively soon, I think.
So, I mean, a broader question here, one that I've seen some discussion of, and there are a few discussions going on right now. You know, how early are we? Does unit size bias matter? Is the current narrative like AI oriented versus kind of front running a lighter regulatory environment, and you just kind of buy the shit coins that are going to get listed or relisted, like on Coinbase, Robinhood, etc.? There's a bunch of stuff floating around, right? But one of the interesting ones from like I guess a macro trading perspective is whether this move should be seen as an event-driven trade or not, right? So by event-driven trade, it's basically that, you know, this is the on the back of the Trump presidency win, essentially, and a bunch of repositioning and front running of the, you know, his administration done on the back of that. But just like any event-driven trade or news-driven trade, there's an expiration date on it, and in general, the bulk of the move is done ahead of the actual news. And by the time the news itself comes, you see some de-risking and fewer marginal buyers left, or not so intelligent marginal buyers left when the headlines come out, right? That's sort of the basis of buy the rumor, sell the news in general. There are a ton of nuances and exceptions to that type of stuff, which we've discussed at length on this show. Like, you need to consider the market as a whole. You need to consider the market's reaction to news. You need to get a sense from flows and positioning, like how much of it was priced in, and also at which point / how close to the news event itself. There are like a ton of nuances. But just in general, from a categorization perspective, do you agree or think that, you know, this move is essentially should be seen as an event trade, or do you see it in another lens? And the other lenses, for example, would be it's like purely technical, right? Like it's a break from a 6-month consolidation that happened to overlap with the news event. And you could also have, like, again, a macro / regulatory view of it, which is less event driven. And like, yes, it's like the Trump thing, but overall crypto, the US has now taken a pro crypto stance, and that's bigger than a single news trade. So out of all those frameworks and all the other ones I obviously haven't discussed in this non-exhaustive list, where do you land?
So a little bit of just a news trade and a little bit of the macro landscape has changed, but mostly the news trade, I think. A bunch of people are basically very happy to get exposure because they feel like the environment has changed. And maybe it has, right? Like maybe, and this is largely my own feelings on Trump, right, that dictate this, because at the end of the day, Trump is the one spearheading this, right? So you kind of have to, like, Trump makes or breaks this thing. And given I have been rugged by him on an NFT before, I'm not entirely sure he's gonna just rug the crypto space in a way, like not as in like not launch crypto and then rug it, but just like go back on his promise. And I think there's a decent chance of that. I think he's more likely to actually fulfill his promise than not, but I think there's a decent chance that he just doesn't do what he says. Like, I would give it like the odds of like 20-30% that he just doesn't do it, which would be a massive event, right? Like, if he doesn't do it and it gets priced in, that is considerable downside. And then even worse, I think, is if he fucks it up. And there's like multiple ways to kind of do it. Going too crazy would basically make him look like a lunatic. I mean, it's crypto after all, right? And I mean, he doesn't really need much help with looking like a lunatic from time to time, but you don't want to like overdo it completely. And I could see like some of his advisors kind of like pushing him in the wrong direction there. But just generally, like, it depends on how you see Trump. If you see Trump as this genius businessman that is never going to fuck anything up in his life, and he's always going to fulfill his promises, and he's going to do it in the best way possible, then I would categorize this more of a landscape shift, right? If you think Trump is just a human being, like a normal human being that like does some things well and some things worse, I think it's more of a news event, and then it depends on kind of how it all plays out. I'm in the camp that I think the closer the presidency gets, and the closer we get to Christmas, basically, the less like the worse the crypto trade becomes. At least short term. I think I drew something up before Trump became president. It was like, if Trump becomes president, that's what I think will happen. I was basically moved to 100K and then back down to 60, 70 after he becomes president, into like sideways into longer term up.
I mean,
right?
60, 70 would be kind of brutal, no?
Yeah, but I think like a lot of this breakout above 60, 70K is just very frothy. Not leverage frothy, but just a bunch of people basically thinking they cannot take a loss on this because it's guaranteed money. I mean, the president of the United States is pushing this, right? So I think everyone in crypto, besides a handful of retard bears, just went all in on that. And if you don't get new flows, basically if you don't get bailed out by the US buying, or if you cannot attract retail, I think that can end quite like poorly. But generally speaking, I think like this is a positive news event ish. Like fundamentally, also a little bit positive. Not as extreme as people say. I think it just accelerates the timeline for crypto, but yeah, it's a positive news event. If it was just Bitcoin, I'd actually be much more bullish on it. But given, like I said, the history with Trump, that he kind of like he dabbles in NFTs, dabbles in like making coins, all that stuff. I legit think I made this point on Twitter that it's crime season, and I legit think that given Trump and what he's done in crypto so far, which has been basically the only thing that he's done in crypto so far has been like rug pulling me, which is like hats off. I think a lot of people are basically gonna do a bunch of crime, and I think that's bearish crypto. So if it was just Bitcoin, that'd be one thing. But I think given Trump and his stance on kind of like regulation and everything, I think he's just basically gonna let crypto do its thing, and that's gonna be bullish short term, but not bullish long term. Because if you have too much crime in a space that just cannot self-regulate, we actually, as a space, kind of make the scammers into heroes, right? Like we've had a bunch of people scam, and they're like community heroes because wow, they made so much money. If only I could scam like that. Like it's just absolutely absurd. And in a space like that, I like less regulation, as dumb as that sounds, coming from like a crypto background, right? Is not necessarily a bullish thing. I think it's just short-term bullish, but it's gonna lead to basically, and you made a tweet like with the whole credit that we have in crypto.
Oh yeah, crime facilitates easy credit creation, and easy credit creation is bullish in the short term. Yeah, that sort of. I mean, crime is bullish. I just think it's true. It's it's how we built the back of many crypto bull cycles. We've obviously paid for it in every single instance.
I mean, that's why the 90%. That's where the 90% pullback comes from, right?
Yes.
Like the crime, like that's literally like the crime part makes this go up so much, but also makes it go down so much.
Exactly. Yeah. Live by the crime, die by the crime, you know?
Yeah, I mean, that's like for a trader, that's the best thing possible, right? Like a market that does so much crime that you like gain 10x more than you should. but then also lose 90, like the market goes down 90%, like that's incredible, because then you can buy it cheap again if you get to sell high. But it's obviously not the best for consumers in a way, right? Like there's a reason why retail has been so sluggish. Like the retail rush has been so slow and so like just generally sluggish this cycle, in comparison to prior cycles. If you remember back 2017, once Bitcoin started breaking out proper, like the entire space was full of people that had no idea what the fuck they were doing, right? And in 2020, 2021, we had the same thing. And this cycle, it's just kind of been like everyone that's already been in crypto, just trading crypto. And one of the reasons for that is just because most people now have been in crypto before. So like if you say like crypto natives, you have a much larger percent of the population. But also I think a lot of the people just generally have been getting burned by crypto cycle over cycle so much that they're kind of like they got sick of it. And the Trump is backing it is kind of a good excuse to just kind of jump back in full risk, being like, oh, but this is backed by the US, so it has to go up. Which leads to funny market dynamics. But so far, we haven't really seen it go into the altcoins too much, right? Like it's just been Bitcoin by and large. Like Bitcoin dominance just completely mooning, and most altcoins are suffering because of the Bitcoin move, which is actually quite funny to see.
Except your bags magically, of course. Your bags and meme coins.
Oh yeah, I mean XRP's been up a lot.
Yes.
Yeah, every day it's like up like 10, 15, 20%.
Fucking love XRP. I mean, XRP back in the day used to be like that coin, which would bleed for months and then retrace months of bleed in like 1 week, like in one
Yeah.
candle. That's
I
what
mean,
it
that's
was known
literally
for.
my trade.
Yeah, that's the thesis there, right?
Yeah. I'm basically like this bled out for the entire last cycle.
Yeah.
And I think it can just reverse that in a week or two and start the whole old season
Start
thing.
criming.
Yeah, I mean that XRP. That's part of the name.
Fucking love it.
Dude, the way
on.
that they used to do market making and stuff is fucking hilarious. Like XRP was so far ahead of the curve in 2017.
Oh, for sure.
In the way they kind of made sure that this thing would go up. I wonder if they still have it in them or not. Nowadays the competition is a little bit more tough, but back then quite impressive. I would like to see some of that crime magic back.
Do you remember the really extensive and to some extent successful gaslighting campaign that we had to endure in the early days, where it was like XRP is not Ripple and Ripple is not XRP?
Oh yeah.
It's just actually fucking unbelievable stuff.
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong, right? When I'm talking about like, hey, I'm making a bunch of money on XRP, I fucking hate that coin and everyone that like is involved in it, right? It's just it's a good vehicle to make money when the market goes up a bunch.
Perfect. Pause. But why don't you apply that same argument to meme coins?
I mean, I could. They're just like low liquidity. I mean, depends on which one you're trading.
True, yeah.
And I mean, the stuff that is traded by people, like if I can pump it, right? Like if I can pump it by just tweeting about it, I will not want to have like part in it. And there's obviously like a retarded thing to say in crypto, because you can just buy something and then tweet about it. And then you exactly want to pick the one that you can move, because then you're guaranteed to make money. But I'm just not a big fan of that. So I just generally stick with the stuff that, like, that's why I don't really have big problems tweeting about WIF and Pepe anymore. They're now that big that like I can talk about them. I can be like, hey, like this is like a trade, whatever. Zero problems. Those are meme coins as well, right? Like, and
sure.
I have no problem with them at all. As same with Dogecoin, like big enough for me to tweet about it. Therefore, I don't have a big problem with doing so, and I feel much better trading them. If I was just running up a smaller portfolio, like I'd probably be in the trends just trading the shit coins too. Like this is what people don't really get with my stance on meme coins. Like I think they are worthless and they're all going to zero at the end of the day, but they're still some of the best places to trade, right? And during the cycle, as long as you don't get the end of the cycle wrong, that's where you actually want to be. It's just like I fucking hate the people that do the whole meme coin Twitter influencer thing, because what they're basically doing is they're playing a game where they cannot lose, because you just have to shill your meme coin. You have a big enough audience, and then it goes up like 100% just because your audience apes in. A bunch of people see it that went up 100%, buy into, your audience is up like 20-30% too. And then no matter what happens, no matter if you pick poorly or if you picked right or whatever, it doesn't matter, right? You win regardless. And I fucking hate that. And this is why I like have such an aggressive stance on the Twitter meme coin stuff, just because that's all it is, right? Like 90% of the people that are doing the whole Twitter meme coin thing, just basically using their audience as kind of like risk-free liquidity, right? Like I can buy like 6 figures of this meme coin and then get my audience to put in like 7 figures of risk in this thing, and then like I have a comfy cushion, right? Like there's so much money that came in after me that I didn't have to pay for, that kind of like waits for my signal on top of all of it, to get out of this thing. So like I have a comfy cushion of a bunch of suckers basically, that make trading so much easier for me, and I just don't like it, and that's why I have a public strong stance on these things. But I'm not hating the people that are trading these. Like, if you want to trade these, just fucking trade them. I dislike the coins, I dislike the influencers, that's all of it.
Fine. Yeah, I think that's at least been consistent. But it's nice at least that there's like a path to progression, if that makes sense, that make them, if you're like a boot centralized exchange boomer, it's not just, meme coins aren't purely confined to the trenches. Some of them get this escape velocity and become pretty liquid centralized exchange coins that still trade pretty well and still have a ton of volatility. Obviously, at that point, you're not like early to the super mega multipliers by the time they got onto Binance or whatever else. But from a trading perspective, fucking looking at Moodang right now, up 40% on the day, right? Brett and Bonk and Dogecoin, there's still a ton of volatility there. And once they make it to centralized exchanges, especially in these conditions, it's kind of like a reasonable version of the best of both worlds, where you still have like meme coin volatility and they trade well, but also it's more likely not going to go minus 90% LP pulled rug, it's over in one candle. And so you sort of, wear a condom, essentially. That's how I view centralized exchange trading of these meme coins. You kind of let it escape the trenches and take up a more familiar boomer format without giving up like all the volatility and that type of stuff. But again, it's about trade-offs, right? Because by the time it gets listed on a centralized exchange, you're probably not going to be catching the 20, 50x from the trenches. That's already done. You kind of have to just view it as another tradable asset. Like, I don't think I'm going to be a spot investor in meme coins that get listed on the centralized exchanges. I don't think that, even if it works out super well, I just don't think the multiplier by definition is going to be as good as someone who caught it when it was only in on Solana or Pump Fund or whatever else.
Yeah, I mean, the harder it is to access, usually the more multipliers you can expect in the long run, but also obviously more risky, all that kind of stuff. But usually, the more accessible something is in crypto, the worse of a bet it actually is. Like, when something is complicated to buy and it actually sounds like a good idea or like a good meme or whatever, that's usually the places where you want to be, because at some point people are going to make it easier to buy. And that's the price is like, they're going to make it easier, but they're also going to buy before they do, right? Which is always quite funny when you see, this is kind of what the exchange listings do, where you have a coin traded on like an obscure exchange, and if it like gets enough traction, people are going to accumulate it for the exchange listing, right? And then you have like another exchange listing that is more popular or whatever, or the first exchange listing, and it's only been on chain, and then those people see it as a new listing and they're like, oh shit, it's a new listing, let's go. But it's already gone up like 100x beforehand. But you don't have that on your chart, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's funny how that works.
I mean, there are a ton of crime methods that you can employ to get around that, right? Like again, when they get listed on a centralized exchange, there's the kind of the listing candle, but most people don't really index based on that. They just look at the subsequent price action. Whereas if you saw the full chart, that might make you view it differently. And there's also the whole token rebrand into something else thing, like
Oh
Polygon,
yeah,
Matic, Pol, whatever. Aave did the same thing, and
dude,
that's
it's
like a very
hilarious.
common move, right?
You go
There's a ton of
through
ways to paint your chart, basically.
you go through bear market, and then best thing to do is at the bear market lows, rebrand, get a new chart, and then it goes up, and people are like, holy shit, this is up only, dude.
Yeah, this is an
There's no
all-time high so
resistance.
early, and it's like
Yeah,
80% from its all-time high.
yeah. There's no resistance on this.
Yeah,
Send
yeah,
it.
yeah. Thing is, it
Yeah.
works. Like, it genuinely works, that type of stuff. It sounds absurd, but
I mean,
there
yeah,
are
you asked
proven
me about that.
methodologies,
Like,
yeah.
you asked me about unit size buys earlier, and I mean that shit works too. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
unit
mean,
size bias is another one. And
I
you saw
think
some of these TikTok comments, right? Meaning if I put this much into here and it goes to $1, like
yeah.
that type of
I
stuff.
mean, that's the peak retardation. I generally think people overdo it with the unit size bias when they go like a coin that is 0 point and then there's like 7 zeros and then there's starts with a number. I think that at that point, like it's a little bit overdone. Like that's just gonna confuse people. But when you have something that's like worth a cent or whatever, or like anything in that range, like numbers that actually make sense, that's gonna attract more normies than otherwise. It's just like people are like, I mean, that's the key, like one of the keys of success of last cycle, or like not even last, Jesus Christ, I'm getting old. The cycle before cycle with XRP, like 2017 cycle, where XRP was like 0.0000 something. And then people were like, oh, this is so cheap. Like it was cheaper than a cent, if I remember correctly, at the beginning of 2017, and then it had a big rally, and then it was in that 0.1 range ish to like $1, and people were like, oh, that's still cheap, right? Like it went a lot, like it went up a lot, but it's still in that 0 point something range. And then they bought it, not realizing that it actually had flipped Bitcoin for a brief moment in full diluted value.
Yeah, that's true. There is a sweet
Um,
spot when it comes to unit size bias, right? You either kind of anchor to easy maths as to how much do I make if it goes to $1 type of thing.
yeah.
Or you have like a large number of zeros, but not so much that it becomes mentally draining to do calculations.
It's pretty much exactly that, yeah.
Yeah, like the benefit of the first one is, again, you just get to anchor to $1 and do Moonboy targets like very easily. The benefit of the second one is you just feel like you can hold a shit ton of the tokens. Like, oh, I have like 10,000 of this or whatever else. I mean, this is just like pure sort of bull market handbook as to what matters. Like the memes where it's listed, unit size bias, fresh chart, all these things we talked about. There's like a crypto crime handbook basically, and I mean more
It's been
projects should
played
also be
before,
launching
yeah.
their tokens. I feel like that it's been
Oh,
a bit slow
yeah.
on that front. Like, what the fuck are
Dude.
you guys waiting for? Like, crime is legal. Zach is AFK. If you're trying to snipe better market conditions than these, then I think you put too much faith in your ability to like time the market at that point, right? Just fucking launch the token.
No. The problem, like even like it gets like you're completely correct, because I think there's one big problem with launching during bull markets, and it's basically launching at top valuation, right? You basically fuck your entire project, and I don't know why these projects are waiting for better conditions. Yes, altcoins are not doing so well in comparison to Bitcoin, but that's the perfect situation to launch token in, right? Like Bitcoin's at all-time high. Everything is kind of struggling versus Bitcoin, at least a little bit. And what you want is basically, you don't want all the value go to early investors, right? Like obviously that's cool for the early investors, but what you want is you want to launch something that goes up after. Like that's how you hit like escape velocity. You don't want to launch something at the and that's what I think a lot of people and projects are trying to do at the peak of the market, where they make like a shitload of money. The valuation is really high. But that's not necessarily the way to go, right? You need people to win, and then they do the marketing for you. So basically, I think like generally when something gets launched near the highest, like that's great for the early investors and everything, but I think that project long term is kind of nuking itself. And I mean, it's quite obvious, right? Like everything is centered around price in crypto. So if you launch a token that immediately goes down, everyone's going to be like, that project is shit. It could be the best project in the world, right? Like if it's launched at the peak of the bull market, at the pico top, and then it just only goes down and you get like a 70-80% drawdown, because that's just kind of how the market cycle works. Everyone is going to disregard that project as the biggest piece of shit on the planet, right? No matter how good it is. So yeah, get to fucking launching, because I don't think you have that much time left.
I just think in general, teams shouldn't be trying to snipe market conditions to that extreme degree.
Oh
you
yeah,
can
it's
always
a
find an
bearish.
argument not to do it, right? Like at the bottom of a bear market, you can just be like, well, there's no volume, no attention, no users, and we'll just fade into irrelevance. There's no hype. And then when it's too hot, if you manage to find a team that cares about like their actual holders and community versus the VCs, I mean, good on you first and foremost.
Yeah, that's hard to do.
Yeah, that one's tough. But then there's also an argument. The argument there is twofold. First is, as you mentioned, like our chart will go down only if the valuation's too high to start, unless there's like an insane amount of liquidity and momentum to carry you through it. But the second one is just like attention dilution in general. Like it's much harder to stand out and compete when everything is fucking ripping, and then you decide to do your launch, and there are 50 coins that are up 30% type of thing, and why should people give a shit about yours? I just think there's no good choice necessarily. Maybe you can try to optimize for one or the other, but just fucking launch your project, and then hopefully your work plus the market does the less of the heavy lifting. I don't want my devs, so to speak, trying to trade this thing, like, oh, RSI is oversold, let's launch. Oh, RSI is overbought, delay testnet for a week. Like, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah, I think generally, you're completely correct. Like, this is a red flag generally. Like, if your dev is trying to time, like, it depends on how big the project is. If your dev is trying to pump your coin as hard as he can, and he's trading like he has like a tiny market cap coin, Godspeed, right? Like, that's gonna help you. Like, you want a criminal dev, because as long as he doesn't dump on you, right? Like, you don't want to have him be that criminal, but at least a little bit criminal, in the sense that they're trying everything to make this thing go up. But generally, I think that coins should launch. And this is a little bit of timing, right? Like, if you say like, hey, dude, you need to launch now because the market conditions are good, and just generally don't want to launch at the peak or top of the bull market, that's technically also telling projects to actually time their launch, right? When you think about it.
Yeah, if you anchor it that way. But I think you'll also frame it as far as the regulatory regime just got about as friendly as you could expect it to be, because there's this weird lag where we don't know exactly what Trump's crypto policies are going to be. The Senate is very strongly pro-crypto, which is, I think, arguably more important than Trump presidency, right? Just the amount of money that crypto poured into these Senate races and won. I think that's way more consequential than like Trump.
They only won one. They only lost one time, right? Like
it's insane.
So there's like a crypto sweep candidate. Yeah. Like, I think it was like 15-1 or something.
So I think that's the best argument, that like, the regulatory landscape isn't so much anchored on the president or the executive branch, but it's the legislative branch, where crypto poured in a ton of money and won, and you have an outgoing, previously hostile SEC around the same time, and it's like this Goldilocks zone where it's going to be friendly, but there's been no time to actually fucking sit down and write the regulation yet. So the probability of enforcement action is like pretty low, and you can see that some exchanges are starting to take that exact stance, because they're just like relisting stuff left, right, and center.
Oh,
it's like, if that's not
Binance is doing, that's crime, dude.
Yeah, Binance is having fun. But like, if that's not if that's not clear enough to you as a dev or as a project or whatever else, then you're not really going to get a clearer signal than that. I think at that point you then descend into trying to time the market and stuff. Also, we haven't spoken about a single fucking technical level horizontal line this entire time, so we're not speaking to like two people. But it's also quite hard to do it in this context, because like, what are you supposed to say? Like, it's just gone up.
I mean, it's up. Like, that's the good part. Like, when you can throw when you can throw the TA out the window and be like, I mean, just sell when the vibes shift. I mean, that's when it gets fun, right? It's obviously, it's out of the comfort zone of most people when you don't have lines to support your thesis anymore.
Sure.
But it is where most of the money is made and lost, right? And I think that's for that reason, right? Like, you cannot draw lines anymore. You cannot risk define anymore. You cannot do anything on that front. It's a lot of guessing, and it's a lot of feeling of kind of how the vibes are. And people are generally usually bad at that the moment they get like a regime shift comes in, right? Because you're so used to the old regime, like, you're so used to trading all these lines in a range, and then it just goes up to infinity, and you're still stuck in that range mindset. and you get fucked, and just cannot take advantage of it. And that's kind of, I think, a part of what's happening.
Yeah. And I mean, who can blame people for that? Because we went through some version of it in 2017, right? So 2018, 2019 BitMEX era, the most
Yeah.
mean reverting, scammy piece of shit market ever. There were a ton of people from our class who kind of cut their teeth on BitMEX, who were very slow to adjust, and that's being charitable. And speaking from personal experience, to 2021 conditions where everything is just like, everything is a real trend, every breakout is real. It can go up for a few days in a row. Quite, with similarly sized daily moves without mean reverting. That was a paradigm shift. If you were trading, BitMEX in 2018, 2019. I do have the daily chart open for BTC.
Bitcoin.
The last time
you're such a boomer, dude.
Oh, I know.
You start with Bitcoin, not with
washed
Mudeng or whatever.
Mudeng, Brett, Popcat, etc. There's also all these AI coins as well. The last time we spoke about this, I think, was just a really well-timed Casual Friday episode.
So good, yeah.
Because, I mean, the discussion was rather straightforward at the time. It's like, hey, look, this is like a mega breakout across all time frames, all the technical stuff, all the regulatory stuff. But the proximity to invalidation is still pretty good compared to what it could become, right? And so the argument was, you either just like close your eyes and buy so that if it starts mooning, you're not fucking paralyzed chasing anything dumb. Like, it's still, it's a breakout, but that it's not like crazy breakout where your proximity invalidation is like 20-30% away. So you just like close your eyes and buy some, and buy yourself some mental bandwidth in real estate as well by not feeling completely sidelined, paralyzed, whatever. Or if you want to be cute with it, you low time frame trade it, and if you get a setup on like the 4 hour, 1 hour, fuck it, 15-minute, right? Like anything that looks remotely technical, you buy that, with the difference being you don't close it at the first trouble area or the first resistance or range high or whatever else. You actually hold it and treat it as like a core position. Now, obviously, the market's progressed since then, and at this point, that same proximity to invalidation is, a tougher sell than it was last week.
You cannot trade that way anymore.
You can't trade that way anymore. We're too far away from the breakout point, so I need to go fucking open my door really quickly. So this is just like a perfect segue with the daily chart open. Could you maybe discuss how it's progressed since then, and maybe how the reasoning's changed now that we've had the push? And I'll be right back.
Yeah, I can. I mean, basically, when we talked about it last, we were trading at like 75K, up 3% from before Trump was elected. And I still remember like the discussion, the whole like, the breakout is sluggish, slow, whatever. And we talked about that being because a bunch of people front ran Trump and now are basically repositioning. And I still think that's kind of true. Like that was kind of like what happened. Like a bunch of people positioned for Trump. You got the breakout. They were like, I'll take my profit. And then we got a little bit of churn around 75, 76K. And now like then got the impulse move once we got through all of that. Cool part about that situation was that, like we talked about, the invalidation was really close. Now when we're trading 20% ish above where we were back then, and your reasonable daily invalidation would actually be below 70K, which is just useless, right? You cannot really trade that way. Like you cannot have an invalidation 20% away. Not for Bitcoin anyway.
It's like 20% now, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it's 20%. So basically, like if you wanna have like a good invalidation, it would have to be at 70K, and that's useless as fuck. So that was kind of like the cool part about that whole 75K breakout, was that it gave you a chance to get in with very minimal risk. And now that is not the case anymore. Now it's just basically like you have to go to the 4 hour. And I think even on the 4 hour, you kind of have troubles finding entries. You're probably going to have to go lower than that. And then any leverage wipe can start at any moment, basically, when the market goes like this, right? Will just take you out. And that's just part of doing business, right? You basically, you have to buy into strength. You have to hope that the strength maintains. And the moment it turns, you have to get out, which basically leads to overtrading. So right now, like if you're not in from lower, the conditions are so much harder to trade this properly. Which, I mean, it's just how the game goes when you get these breakouts. you have to go very low time frame, or you have to go to different areas. So as in like not trading Bitcoin, but trading altcoins. But you're kind of in the same boat on the altcoin front. If Bitcoin wipes, you're gonna get wiped along with it. Proper wipe. Like that fucking like when Bitcoin wipes during bull markets, you usually get like 20, 30, 40% pullbacks on the altcoins, right? And I think that's what everyone is afraid of. And that's why trading is so hard right now, even though we just keep making new highs. So yeah, I mean, last Casual Friday was perfectly timed just because of basically the risk to reward ratio being that good. Now it's much less good, but the market's obviously teleporting. And you can, I think, with the altcoins, even if it pulls back a bunch, even if you get like that kind of wipeout, you just need to make sure that you're going to be able to buy it, and that you're not going to be a forced seller at those levels. And however you get there depends wholly on you, right? Like whether you just don't want to get in, but then risk missing the entire run, or if you want to get in a little bit, or if you want to get in like a lot and then just manage your position. So it's like if it's at risk of wiping out, you get out, and then but that gets you chopped. It's the reason why at the beginning of the show I was like, I have actually been trading really poorly, still made money, but traded poorly, because of exactly that issue where you're like, you have to kind of balance in between like taking a bunch of risk because there's a very high chance of upside, but also knowing that the risk is very high given that it wouldn't take much for the market to just kind of fully crater, at least on the altcoin front.
Yeah, especially on the altcoin leverage front. I mean, if you look at the BTC daily chart, right, it looks
Yeah.
insane. So it consolidated for this long, it broke out, and there's like two red candles, none of which broke market structure or pushed prices lower at any point, in any material way, right? Like these so-called pullbacks are like invisible on the daily time frame and have had close to zero impact. But if you look at how altcoins performed during those moves and just the number of like long liquidations, both on BTC and altcoins, it's actually like a shockingly high amount. Or I guess not
Yeah.
shockingly, given it's what happens every fucking time, but relative to the size of the pullback, it's like those are pretty big wipeouts. So that's exactly where the risk is. It's that if you correctly identify, the long-term trend or the high time frame picture or whatever, but you express your views via very leveraged altcoin positions with shitty entries, the market could just sneeze and you are out of your position, even though materially like absolutely nothing has changed.
Yeah.
And that's not like a random fear mongering either. That's literally what happened like a couple of days ago. Bitcoin sneezed and a lot of these alts were down like double digits on the day. And looking at like open interest on a bunch of them, etc., like people were getting wiped out on those types of moves. Like imagine getting liquidated with BTC at 90K. You've got to just fundamentally feel terrible as a human being when that kind of shit happens.
And you know that like there's a very high likelihood of an altcoin move coming, right? Like that's the worst of it.
Yes.
Like you get taken out of your position, but you're pretty damn certain that it's actually gonna go up.
Yeah,
Like that's the worst part of like what the fuck do you do? Because then you have to reload or whatever because you're like, fuck, like I lost the position. All season's coming, and I think that's like consensus view. I think it's a dangerous consensus view because it really doesn't have to. But I think the chances are quite good. But then what the fuck do you do, right? It's a little bit scary. Like, and this is why like leverage is like, I mean, it's a gift and a curse, right? And I just generally like stop losses in the market, like market conditions like this, where you or like invalidations of sorts. This is why the retards do so well now because they don't understand that they're actually taking a lot of risk or they don't care. And the people that understand that they're taking a lot of risk, they have like mental stop losses, physical stop losses, whatever the fuck. And then those kind of wipes take them out. Whereas the like complete and utter idiots that sit there and they're like, oh, it's even cheaper now. Let me wire some more money in. And they keep doing that until the market tops and takes everything away from them again. But I think like legit, like in market conditions like this, just trading spot is gonna be the easiest way to do it. Like you find something that's decent, you don't over rotate, you just take the loss, like you just take the drawdown if it happens, right? Like if you get a leverage wipe, you just take it, and maybe you can add some on that leverage like wipe. and then just fucking pray that this is not gonna be a not normal cycle that doesn't have like an old season at the end. And I think the chances of an old season at the end are quite high with the regulatory landscape that we have right now. I think the world, basically the S&P and the entire world stock market would have to nuke to stop this. Like I think there's no other way
to stop the crime wave. It's very bullish.
We're getting a crime wave, whether you like it or not, unless the entire market's crazy. And right now, I think before Trump becomes president, I don't necessarily think they would do it. After I could see it, honestly, and not because of Trump. And this is always hilarious, right? Like this is when people talk about politics and like, for example, like the whole Biden gas prices, like where people put like the whole I did that on the gas pumps, right? Like the sticker, the Biden sticker. And people are like, don't understand that this shit takes some time, right? So basically, Trump becomes president, does one thing, the stock market nukes, and everyone's like, Trump's responsible for this, right? And it's not necessarily true, right? This in the same way where Trump was like, hey, the stock market is like completely gigasending when he was president. And it's not necessarily because of him, right? This is not how markets work. But people just kind of attribute it to those. So I could see like just generally how it's set up. I could see like a bigger wipe on the traditional markets once Trump is president. And then people are going to blame him in the same way that he actually took credit. And I mean, this is how politicians do it anyway, right?
Yeah, they do it with the economy, they do it with everything. And look, it's not immediately intuitive unless you either study it or come from a trading background to understand like the lag that's built into a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
So it's much easier to just say, this is the president, this is the outcome, therefore outcome comes from the current president, you know?
Yeah.
But for a lot of these things, there are structural forces at play, there are time delays at play, there are, you know, global geopolitical stuff unrelated to that specific administration that are at play. It's actually very fucking complicated. And when it gets really complicated, the easiest thing to do is to reduce it to the point of being wrong in many cases, but just go back to this president is responsible because it's happening right now and he's the president, you know, just sort of and not think past that. I do want to, in the spirit of Casual Friday, try to, theoretical discussions aside, anchor it back to sort of practical reality and trying to be useful at this juncture of the market. Obviously, last week it was way easier. Like, the real tempting answer is you should have just fucking watched Casual Friday last week because that's when it was like more straightforward than not. I think it's a bit tougher at this point. And what also makes it tougher is when you're speaking like into the ether to like a broad audience, you actually have no idea of like their risk appetite, how they're currently positioned, the kind of timeframes they like to trade on, you know, all those things which should massively, under ordinary circumstances, kind of change our not financial advice answers. Without knowing any of that information, it's just hard to generalize, you know, unless we go through like a very onerous process of building like a whole if spot and you're like 24 and have a job, you know, like doing that whole thing. You can't really do it. So, but I mean, if we try, I think at this point, if you're still just like, if you want, I think like the simplest premise to start with is if you want exposure, you should have exposure. That just seems generally true for crypto, right? Like a lot of like, if you really want something, like, oh, I can't
spot,
buy
right?
it. Yes, exactly. That's absolutely like what's the correct instrument to express that type of view? I think it's spot. Because if you have spot, the probability that you get leverage wiped is 0. I mean, unless you're using spot margin or something, but I don't count that as spot, right? I just mean like spot itself. So let's just try to distill it to like very straightforward principles. And I think the most straightforward one is if you want exposure, you should have exposure. And I think an important thing to understand is that you don't have the luxury or the right to choose your entry if you want to be so indiscriminate with it. I think people often try to have the best of both worlds, where it's like, oh, I just want to be like very chill, hands off. It'll generally go up, have some spot exposure, taking like a very loose and lackadaisical approach. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but at the same time, when you tell them, okay, well then just buy some, then they start sending you fucking 15-minute charts about order block, FVG. I think this would be the perfect 618 retrace. Like, no, you can't mix and match those two things together. Like if you're going to be in the camp of, I think this is bullish, I think the 6-month breakout is bullish, even if the Trump inauguration is like a risk-off thing, I think the regulatory environment is a much bigger lever, I think crypto is generally going up and to the right, then spot is the best instrument to express that view, and you do not have the luxury or the right to then be arrogant about your entry. Like, you've given that up. Stop playing trader if that's your mindset and preferred way of taking risk in the market. That just makes sense to me. I don't know if you agree or not.
Yeah, I do agree. And I mean, at the end of the day, when you're trading spot, or not even trading, if you're buying spot, the big advantage that you have is basically that you don't give anyone the chance to take your coins away from you. The only thing that can make those coins go is by you pushing the button, right? Like, and that's like legit, like a big difference. Like you introduce some leverage, even if it's low leverage, someone can take that shit from you. And if you are certain that something is gonna go up, you just suck at trading. And I mean, like, for example, like I would say I've been sucking at trading in the last 2-3 days. Like, you kind of just introduce the risk back into that thing, right? Like, you're like, oh, I have found a really risk-free, kind of like really good opportunity, but let me introduce a bunch of risk to fuck it up by introducing leverage. And I think that's like one of the biggest pitfalls people fall into, that don't necessarily, like, they're not professional traders, and they're like, I need to make more money than what I'm gonna make. And that's the one thing that's probably gonna fuck you over the most.
Yes, I mean, that's completely true. You're like adding risk on top of risk. And you're almost defeating the whole point of, oh, I want to be hands off and ride it if you're adding leverage, because at that point, you basically can't be, because you've now introduced the chance of you being right, but your coin's still disappearing, which you don't get with spot. From a, if we continue down this, okay, I think this is like a regime, regulatory landscape, etc., paradigm shift, and I'm buying spot. I think when we spoke last week, there was a very straightforward invalidation for that. And I think in general, if you're taking this first approach, your invalidation should be much looser, because you're not trading around your entry as much. You almost shouldn't think of it as a trade, right? Or certainly less so. When it comes to invalidations for this type of thing, I think the harsh reality of the matter is that if you want to be accurate about it, your invalidation is still the same as it was last week. You're just paying a higher price and a wider stop for it. And that's just a reflection of the reality that you missed the post-breakout leg, like, again. And I didn't think there's like an easy way to get around that, because if you start trailing too aggressively and saying, oh, what about like the low of this consolidation at like 85k, etc., I just think that's way too tight for spot. I think that would be a classic example of, like, trader creep, basically. When you convince yourself that you're a hands-off, low frequency of rebalancing spot trader, and then your trader brain starts like sneaking in to influence your decision making. I actually think that's really terrible, and I think that's terrible both ways. When you're like a trader and you let your spot brain take over, and when you're a spot trader, you let your trader brain take over. I just think that generally leads to worse decisions. So we've answered the first question as far as, if you're kind of long-term paradigm shift oriented, what to do. It's like, well, if you want exposure, get exposure. It's not gonna mollycoddle that more than it has to be. But as far as where's the invalidation for that, I think the harsh answer is it's still the same, which is that this entire thing is premised on the high time frame breakout, and the invalidation for the high time frame breakout hasn't really changed. And that's still at like, what, 70k basically, 69, 70k. Now, is that worse than last week? Yes. Is that surprising given the market moved up? Well, no, there's just the cost of doing business, right? You waited for more confirmation, you're buying on the back of more strength, and you have to pay the price for that one way or another. And the price you pay is a wider invalidation, which in turn can affect your position sizing. And I really think the remedy there is from this spot mindset, it's kind of too bad, like, it's too bad. There was an A+ opportunity that was basically last week. And if you didn't take that, I think it's almost arrogant to assume that you get another lazy buy spot and ride off into the sunset A+ opportunity 1 week later, So that's another spot consideration as far as invalidation. I think the only other thing would be that if you're not convinced by this, I want exposure, so I'm going to get some, or if you're not convinced by having an invalidation 20% away, which I don't blame people for, like, that's a position I can sympathize with. I think the only other option you have left is to wait for a flush, whatever price that comes at. Now, of course, that in itself has different trade-offs, which is to say the flush could come from like 105k to 94, for example, right?
Yeah.
And at that point, you're still paying a higher price for BTC than you would be now. But the EV, in some terms at least, of buying spot there is arguably higher than it would be.
Yeah.
Now, again, the benefit there is you're actually buying off the back of what is contextually a better entry. And I think, second of all, with those flush type of spot entries, your invalidation won't be the 70k breakout. It'll be whatever around the low of the flush is, and or whatever horizontal type high time frame range structure we've built at that time. So those are good things. The bad thing is, obviously, you're not guaranteed a flush, and when the flush comes, it might come at such a high price that you'd be kicking yourself for not buying at 70, 80, 90, whatever. But again, it's optionality. Like at that point, you're sacrificing the comfort of a lower entry price for the benefit of actually, having a setup and having an invalidation that isn't fucking 20-40% away. So just to summarize the spot section, I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you really want exposure, get some fucking exposure. And if your stop is too wide, too bad. That's what happens when the market goes up a lot and you want to be hands off with it. That just seems straightforward. If you're still spot oriented and you want that exposure, but not bad enough to just like market buy high, and you want to have some semblance of a setup for it, and or some semblance of a superior proximity to invalidation that isn't 20% away, realistically, your best option is going to be to wait for a flush. And a flush would mean what, like double digit down on BTC and more on altcoins, and then you essentially just start buying then when the whole thing is fucking bloody. You have the benefit of having a better entry contextually, even if it's not a better entry in absolute dollar terms, and you have the benefit of actually having an invalidation that's not 20, 30, 40% away, because that would be insane for flush type setups. And of course, again, as mentioned, the downside of that approach is it could either just fucking never happen, or more realistically, when it does happen, it could be at a much higher price. So if you really care about entry price, you're going to have to, again, bite that bullet and say, well, this is a better setup, even though the price of BTC is higher. So I think that's a reasonable framework for spot. What do you think?
Yeah, I 100% agree. Just generally, like, I mean, last week you had the last week's episode was basically the moment where you could still introduce leverage to the whole like thing. Because you had a setup, because you had tight invalidation, you had all of that. I don't think you have, like, as like a little bit zoomed out person, you don't have the luxury of leverage anymore. It's just spot now. And that leverage, like the opportunity to introduce leverage to the equation again, it's gonna come. But like you said, it could come. Bitcoin could go to 150 and then pull back to 120, and that might be an opportunity. But that's much higher than where it is right now. But that's just how it is. Like leverage is not something that you can just put on because you want to have more size. Leverage is something that you can use. I mean, obviously, the traditional ways, like there's a bunch of like ways to hedge yourself with leverage, all that kind of stuff, like the complicated stuff. But just generally, like when you want to build like a bigger position than you normally would, just by limiting your risk, which you can do with leverage, right? Like if you're like, okay, I'm risking very little here because my invalidation is tight. Like we had like a 4% invalidation, 3% invalidation last week. Where you can lever up, like you can be like, hey, I'm levering up 2x. I'm willing to lose like 6% instead of the 3% that I would normally do on this trade. But that's a luxury, right? That's a luxury of having a good setup. And if you try to force the leverage into the trade, just because you want to have more Bitcoin, more gains, more whatever, you're gonna lose your money, right? You could get lucky, and you could buy Bitcoin with leverage right now at 89k, and tomorrow it's at 94, and the day after it's at 110, and you just luck out basically. But generally, it's ill-advised, and if you do that too many times, it's just gonna completely take you out. And so, like, basically for Bitcoin, it's like it's spot market now, I think, or like a very low time frame market where you just trade the low time frames and you just take it as it comes. For the altcoins, it's a little bit similar. The the setups are a little bit more risk defined because they've been struggling to keep up with Bitcoin. But that's kind of like they're wearing a disguise, right? You're looking at it and you're like, oh, this is risk defined, but you know that like Bitcoin's rallied from 60 to 90K. And if it wants to leverage swipe, your risk defined setup is still gonna get stopped out, right? But there's some risk definition in some of the altcoins at least. But still, like it's just harder now. Like you said, I want to give people something like actionable. I think it's really, really hard now. It's much easier. Like was much easier last week.
Literally a week ago, yeah. I think the spot part is covered now. In both of us in passing mentioned, if you're more actively trading this, I think the underlying rule by definition with these types of trends, if you want to be more active with it, lower time frame trading it, getting an entry, it has to be done on, well, lower time frames. Because you're not going to be getting amazing daily signals on moves like this unless we really start consolidating for a while, and then you give the market a chance to build out a high time frame range or cluster, and then you can do business. But it's still a bit early for that with the amount of days we have, right? So then, so let's say someone fast forwarded through the spot section, was like, no, I'm like actively trading, I just like one entry, etc. I think point number one is mentioned, you just have to be on the lower time frames. I think point number two that's generally helpful is that in really strong trends, consolidations are actually a form of pullback. So it's very common to, if you've just come out of baby pips or whatever, to be like, okay, well, after a breakout, and your brain immediately goes to retest. And that's it. That's kind of the only acceptable option post-breakout. But I think in crypto, at least, with these types of trends, that's just a really bad bet to make. Because if it retests very quickly or soon after the breakout, generally speaking, the breakout is like a piece of shit, at least on BTC. It's fine if it happens later, but in the short to medium term, if you have like a really big breakout and suddenly it erases the whole thing, it's like not a good sign, not what you want to be trading. So then the only retests, so to speak, that are acceptable would be on lower time frames, and I'm talking like 1 hour and below, maybe 4 hour, but even that seems like a bit of a stretch. So realistically, if you're trading around this type of thing, most of your entries are either going to be based on low time frame consolidations, low time frame ranges, low time frame fast moving averages, or I think the last one, which is the most interesting one, especially when it comes to altcoins, which we'll discuss in a moment, is like forced selling on correlated pullbacks / leverage flushes. I really think that's your kind of toolkit if you want to catch a piece of this and you're more willing to actively trade around it, rebalance, etc. Do you think I've missed any? Do you think some are better than others? What stands out to you from that section, or is it all horse shit?
No, I mean it's it's not all horseshit. It's actually like I generally think the only way to properly trade, if you don't have a position right now, is like waiting for the flush. The problem that I have right now is I actually don't think it's gonna come anytime soon. So I think you basically have to gamble if you want to have like big exposure. Because like the sensible trading, I think you're probably not gonna get. Like, I mean, there is going to be a leverage flush, but I just don't like at this point right now, after yesterday and how Bitcoin's been trading, I think that's kind of gone away. Bitcoin looks like,
I mean, we had one, right? That's the crazy part. It doesn't look like it on the chart, but like that down day, 2 days ago or 3 days ago or whatever, like if you look at the amount of long liquidations during that period and what happened to premiums across the board and altcoin performance, that was a flush of sorts. I think in this kind of regime, you almost have to differentiate between flushes that lead to like significant down moves, like on a percentage basis, versus flushes that don't do a bunch of damage to the chart but reset positioning, especially in altcoins, but I also think that works both ways. I remember there was a BTC move at like 50 something K. God, when was that? I think it might have been no, that's the Luna one. There was like a BTC move at some point, and we talked about it on a Casual Friday, where BTC itself looked just really fucking good, but then the altcoin funding rates and amount of open interest that was being ramped at the highs was just absolutely insane. And that altcoin weakness spilled over, and for a change actually dragged down Bitcoin with it. So it kind of works both ways, right? Like if BTC sneezes and has a mini flush, then your altcoins go down the shitter as well. But then even if BTC looks good, but the altcoins are like way too, the positioning there is pretty terrible, they can also drag down the whole market in that kind of context. So I think in this case, we basically had a leverage flush of some sort. on like in the last couple of days, because altcoins got massacred in like relative terms if you're super high leverage by being down like double digits. A lot of them, a bunch of long liquidations, even though you wouldn't be able to see it on the chart if you were assessing the percentage move on BTC or the damage done or whatever else. So you almost have to adjust. I think what I'm trying to get to is you have to have like two types of leverage flush. I think if you're actively trading this, one is like a soft reset in positioning when the frothiest of the froth just pukes as a result of BTC slowing down a little bit or consolidating, and that's for like really aggressive trend following, and that happens more frequently. And the second type is like the big leverage flush, where it's a nuke and open interest, liquidations going up a shit ton, but then also actual fucking chart damage, so to speak, on BTC and altcoins. And those types of leverage flushes are generally better opportunities. They happen less frequently, and the moves are also bigger as a result. So I think like a 2-tier leverage flush framework is appropriate in these conditions, at least historically. One being more localized, where the cream at the top of the fucking cake gets taken off, but the cake is still intact, and it's just the frothiest of the froth gets nuked, and the charts on the whole, especially for BTC, still looks intact, and you can't really tell if you didn't know that there was a reset. And the second one is like the big one, like, okay, holy shit, this is scary now, time to get involved. And the first one happens more frequently, but is generally less good of an entry. The second one happens less frequently, but is a better entry, and you get better prices. Do you agree with that, or do you think I'm making two things out of one?
No, exactly right.
Okay, great. And any other comments on if you're actively trading type? Because you seem pretty, like, from my understanding, I think out of all the shit I mentioned, like the low time frame ranges, low time frame trend following, like all that type of shit, you don't find those particularly interesting. And realistically, if you want like a trader type entry, you either just FOMO in and bite the bullet, or you need like one of the bigger flushes. Is that your stance?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, you basically right now you basically just have to take a shitty trade no matter what. Like either you just sit it out and you don't take a trade, which is a shit trade, right? Like that's not fun when the market is like when everyone's printing. But that's like I think that's a reasonable thing to do. Like just sit it out. I just don't necessarily think being reasonable will help you much right now. Like you need to be dumb. But if you go dumb and you take the trade and you bite the bullet, the chance that you're gonna take like an absolute fucking beating is quite high. But I think right now that trade-off might even still be on the side of just being dumb and just taking a bad trade and biting the bullet and just saying fuck it. Like some of the altcoins, I think have big enough opportunity that like taking a risk of having one terrible trade might actually still be worth it. But I don't think that's the case for much longer. And at that point, you're just gonna have to wait for the leverage flush. And honestly, like if we get like if this market keeps moving like it does, that leverage flush might just get you, and that's the shitty part, right? Like that leverage flush might just get you to like the complacency shoulder. Like you get a nuke and then you get a bounce and you're like you bought the nuke and you're like fuck yeah, and then it doesn't go back to the high and then just completely creates afterwards. And I think at this point in how this market is kind of moving, I think that's also a possibility where it's just like it just keeps going up until it's actually just topped, at least short term. As in short term, like for like a month or two, where it's like you've waited all this time where it runs up and then you get your entry and all it is the first low before it actually just goes lower. So there's no real good trade to be had anymore. It's just basically closing your eyes and praying, or being able to just take the flush, be nimble enough that if it's actually just the flush that leads to like that, the top flush basically, that you can get out with decent profit. Because even if it's the top flush, right? Like let's say the Bitcoin goes to 120K and then flushes to 90, and then it makes a lower high at 100 or 110, like that 90 to 110 trade is still quite a good trade, right? But if you're then at that point stuck in your mindset of being like, hey, this was the flush and now it has to go high, it has to make a new all-time high, and you stick with your position for too long, that'd be like a bad trade, I think. So it's really hard right now. I think the best course of action, unironically, is probably just biting the bullet on some of these. But it's really hard to do when Bitcoin's trading at almost 100K, because that just seems silly, right? Like it was trading at 60K a week ago. Or like 2 weeks ago.
Study recency bias, Don. This is the thing I tweeted about. Who the fuck cares about the price 2 weeks ago? I mean, to some extent anyway. But
that's what I'm saying. But still,
like, I completely agree.
But
the market has some degree of muscle memory, like, built-in memory anyway.
And I mean, the risk is quite high. Like that's just what you have to realize. Like if you buy something that just went from 60 to 100K, the risk of that is so much. Like I generally think last week's episode, right? You had much less risk. Like even of it just generally going up, right? Like from here on out, like I think, because usually it's like the price is higher, but at least I have less risk because the breakout is confirmed, whatever. I think now you have more risk because we moved so much that there's just risk that it just craters. And the reward is also smaller. So basically it's just such a bad trade in comparison, but it's still better than just being like completely sidelined, coping, and then buying the absolute peak of
the absolute top. Yeah, that's the shit post I made. Like you stay sidelined, then you top blast it, like the classic setup, and then you puke the pullback, like the trifecta. I think you raised a really interesting point. Like you were like, listen, even if it's a shit trade, like biting the bullet, excuse me, Jesus. Even if it's a shit trade, biting the bullet once isn't like the worst idea in the world. And I think that raises like an interesting, very interesting like framework question. If you know you're taking a shit trade, there are different types of shit trades. Like if the market, like what's the opportunity if you're right and there's a good payoff on that shit trade, essentially? Or, what's the EV as a whole? Like for example, let's say the market is just like a ranging piece of shit with no volatility and you take a shit trade. Like even if you're right, your upside is like so capped that the shit trade working out like almost isn't worth it. Especially if you take it several times. But if the market's like this and you take what's technically a shit trade, at least it's somewhat easier to justify. It's more palatable than the first example, because if you're right and the market bails you out, as it has been in many cases, then you can sort of at least start to justify it from a process point of view. Like it's still a shit trade, but I think it's less shit than the first one, because you can make at least a plausible case for the reward being worth it if it works out. But the overall theme, and I'm sure you'll agree, is that like at this point with leverage and stuff like that, it's just shittier than last week. That's just the reality of the situation. We can go around as much as we want in circles with regard to, you have spot and maybe you get a leverage wipeout and have an update in validation, but it's just like a worse range of decisions than it was last week. And that's just like the reality of a market that moves like this, Yeah. I think it'd be really tempting, and as I've seen a lot on Twitter, and crypto YouTube to some extent when I've seen thumbnails and shit, to basically make people feel that the market like always remains risk-free as long as it's going up. Like, it's up from, it's up to fucking 90K from 60K, but don't worry, the opportunity today is just as good and just as clear as it was then. And I just don't think that's true. In fact, I think it's like plainly false. I think you'd be better off at least being well armed with the trade-offs involved. Like if I want spot, if I want futures, what kind of setups are worth it? How price sensitive am I specifically to Bitcoin? Like for example, you can take a shit trade at 90, but you can take a really good trade if it leverage flushes and ends up at 100K, having gone much higher than 100K, right? But if your preferences are such that you're very price sensitive, then maybe the shit trade is a better trade for you than the higher EV leverage trade, even though the Bitcoin price is better on the worse setup, if that makes sense. There's like so much stuff that goes into this, and I think the only kind of public service, if you will, that we can do in discussing this shit is obviously talking about what makes sense for us, but also at least making the trade-offs clear at any time. And as we banged on about last week, that's all it comes down to, really. It's just different trade-offs. The market is never made up of like this like static risk profile, and you just like you can essentially make the risk disappear, or it's always the same, or just wait for confirmation and then there's no risk. Like that type of stuff I think is just really bad trading practice. And that really means that the real answer is you should fucking travel back in time to last Casual Friday, where our so-called job was a lot easier, right?
Yeah, I mean, poor people are listening to this that were listening to last week and just didn't pull the trigger, and like I mean, I'm sorry, dudes. I'm sorry. It's
That's
just how it
true.
is. Um,
Well,
but it is what it is. I still, yeah. We can talk about it. ETH's so fucking boring though in comparison to a lot of other setups. But I genuinely think that might turn around at some point. But it's like, I mean, I'm trading fucking XRP now.
That's true.
Um,
You just leave. I mean, you are the manifestation of essentially the your description of ETH as the midwit trade, where you just kind of jump from BTC to meme coins, and that's XRP at this point, and
yeah.
Doge, etc. Although I will say that
I mean,
ETH
I'm
hasn't
trading
been.
XRP and Litecoin. Yeah.
Well, yeah, Jesus, Litecoin with their social media strategy. That said, the ETH side hasn't been a complete dud from a technical point of view, at least. Do you
Oh,
remember last
ETHUSD
week's?
is nice. Yeah.
Yeah, do you remember last week's weekly range from like the highest close at 3.8, the lowest close at 3, basically?
Yeah.
And there was a midpoint that came out of that at 3.4. I mean, that was dinged perfectly.
Yep.
There's some really good price action around that. Be it for profit taking or whatever else. And that, I think, it's what's particularly impressive in this context is that look at the candles that led up to it. It genuinely looked like it was going to infinity with like what 6, 7 green candles in a row.
Yep.
So that level was useful. But I think we had a very clear decision tree last time for ETH, being like 2.7 breakout. That should take you to 3, and then 3 plus is a banger, and in general your update and validation is 3. Has any of that changed? Like, would you rebuy 3K? Do you still think that's an update in validation? Do you have concerns about ETH BTC? Because I think the risk here is that, and I think this is like a very common behavior with weaker coins in general when BTC is strong. People who like to anchor based on technical levels will just find a coin that looks closer to a retest than BTC is, for example. And that gives them like a mental cushion, being like, okay, well, I missed out on BTC and there's no fucking levels on it whatsoever, but this thing has, it's pulled back and has nice horizontal levels, so I should buy it instead. And I think the real trap there is that in itself, it's actually not a good sign that the thing you're trading has levels. Like the very fact
Yes.
that it's offering you a retest and is giving you like very convenient horizontal stuff compared to shit just melting up through all-time highs, that's at least a local sign of weakness relative to the strong stuff, not strength. It's almost like it's bait, like, oh,
It
well,
is.
this thing is like really strong and it's up a lot, but this other thing has a nice retest and horizontal levels. That's way more comfortable. It's like, well, yeah, but it has that retest for a reason, and that reason is weakness relative to the strong stuff. So what do you think of ETH? What do you think of the levels? Would you buy it? Do you think the logic from 15 seconds ago is correct, or is it spurious? As the resident ETH BTC bull, where do you sit on this?
I mean, I just think like I want to have ETH, and I like the ETH USD chart, but I think it basically falls exactly in the trap that you just talked about. Like, it's comfy because it's so close to support, which is a really bad sign because everything's just full send, right? But I mean, I generally what I'm gonna do, right? Now that I've bought a bunch of like utter crap like XRP and Litecoin, and it's hilarious how those are the best movers besides like complete and utter dog shit memes. And not like Litecoin and XRP are particularly good, but what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna rotate the profits into ETH, I think. But for that, I need to make some more profit. So I kind of like, just from a personal standpoint, I just hope that the ETH thing is slow, and it kind of looks like it right now. It looks like basically the ETH trade is the pain trade, where you see everything else mooning and ETH does nothing. Kind of reminds me of last cycle, where ETH didn't really. I mean, ETH was really good, but it didn't really do what people thought it would. Like they thought it would just teleport to infinity, and then it just basically like made a new high after Bitcoin did, if I remember correctly, and like was stronger after Bitcoin was dying, not before. So I just kind of I hope that it's slow for personal reasons, and I think just generally I could also see it just from the chart that like the ETH trade is going to be the pain trade for a while. I actually also think Solana is going to be in the same boat. Like I think it's funny because the Solana people made fun of ETH for the longest time. I think they're basically in the same boat right now, where it's like sluggish, you have overhangs, all that kind of stuff, and then when the bull market heats up and people are looking for anything that they can buy, I think those are the ones that are actually gonna like go after the other ones, because the other ones have less overhang, are more like it's easier to speculate on retail just buying them, and then once that's done and over with, I think the ETH trade becomes more clear. But I mean, right now, like when you look at ETH BTC, that's horrendous. Like that's a terrible chart. And it's the same. It's honestly the same with most altcoins. The Bitcoin charts look terrible.
Oh my god, what the fuck is ETH BTC, dude? That's
Yeah,
actually
it's-
disgusting.
Like that's horrendous. Like, and look at Sol BTC. Like on the like it fully retraced its up move too. Sol BTC is a little bit more palatable than ETH, but not by much. And then you go and you check like other stuff against BTC.
Litecoin?
I mean, Litecoin's good against BTC. Like that actually, like on the weekly, I mean, it's just red candles, but on the daily, like that's actually
I was going to say, it's only like an
impressive.
8-year downtrend on.
Yeah. I mean, high time frame, that's not that great, but like low time frame, that's actually quite impressive. I
That one day.
Yeah, like that one day. I don't know where exactly that came from, but
one day out of like
1 day out of infinite days. Yeah, no, but like just low time. Like, I mean, I've been trading these, right? Like low time frame strength is there
Sure.
on some of these, and on others it's not. And Litecoin, for example, has the low time frame strength. XRP has had the low time frame strength. Solana has had it much less, and ETH basically hasn't had it at all. And that can switch really fast, but I think right now it's not time yet. So I think ETH, if you're trading ETH USD and you like ETH, it's in a decent spot. I think it's getting closer to invalidation again. Like it's like a decent invalidation where it is right now. Like 2.7, 2.8K, you really don't want to go lower than that. And you really actually don't want to retest it in the first place. So somewhere between, I think like 2.9 and 3.1, where we are right now, ETH USD is actually interesting for a trade. But I mean, there's a good chance it's just going to be outperformed by everything else for like the short time frame. And then at some point, I think it's going to start outperforming, but not right now.
I think it's a good example of, again, what we've been harping on about trade-offs. It's like the trade-off here is that you've got a nice technical level and better proximity to validation, but that comes at the cost of the market being weaker by definition.
Yep.
And, like with the other coins, like, BTC or some of these meme coins, you don't have the luxury of that proximity to validation, but the upside is it's stronger. So just always know the game you're playing. I think it's like a really good mental process to start with. Like, if I want to trade this, what are the implicit trade-offs into the setup I'm taking or the asset I'm trading relative to something else, so on and so forth. And there always is a trade-off. I think that's, you can't get around it. Do you want to talk about some of your bags? XRP, and then we can talk about some of the memes as well.
I mean, we can. There's really not that much to talk about. I mean, XRP, the reason, like if you go on the monthly for XRP, XRP USD, you can draw a very clean range between, like there's a range bottom at 0.32-ish, and there's a range high at 0.69-ish.
Yeah.
And we're breaking out of that right now on this monthly. And like I was like, XRP unit size buy is pretty good. Costs little. Obviously costs the exact same as anything else. But like two people, this will be cheap. And XRP is also the retail coin of old. And I generally think with this cycle, so I basically think a lot of the 2017 people didn't come back for DeFi season in 2021.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people basically, like it was a different audience. Like it was the TikTok people in 2021, like the whole like food tokens and then also meme coins. And in 2017, it was like a different audience. And I think the 2017 people are probably going to come back now that we have like Trump in office and all that kind of stuff. And I think they might look for something like XRP to start with before they go completely idiotic into like the dumbest shit ever. And just generally, given that Gensler is out now and he was kind of like going after XRP, like that's like an added confidence to just like the trade. A lot of people sold because they were afraid of sanctions and afraid of like regulatory attacks. And those people, I think, could also come back. So you have a bunch of people coming back. It's a no name. The unit size price is like decent, and it has a monthly breakout. So that was pretty much all I wanted from like a coin. And I basically bought into the first momentum I got, which was like 0.6 something. The moment we started breaking out of the daily, I was like, okay, it's retard season, it's XRP, let's go. And I mean, it's trading much higher now. It's a little bit harder of a trade, but it's still technically on the high time frames. It's still nowhere close to where I would want to, like where I would want this to go.
Yeah, where is that? And
I
is it
mean,
like 118?
it's 1.5 and 3.5, and then
Oh Jesus, okay.
and then much higher if it goes completely
Okay,
stupid.
is this going to be one of those where you buy like the cusp of a high time frame breakout outperformer and then fucking paper hand it down?
Very possible. I mean, at the end of the day, I think yeah,
Yeah.
probably, probably. I mean, if it goes to 1.5 and I get tired of just having to stare at charts all day, because that's kind of what you do when you're actively trading. I could see me just paper hand it and it goes to like fucking $5 after.
Fine. Yeah.
But just generally, I think it's at the cusp of a high time frame breakout. It's perfectly situated for it. It's dumb enough to attract retail, and it's interesting enough for like older money to play it, and it's they do enough crime.
Allegedly.
Allegedly, for market to go up. That's kind of like all the reasons that I had. So far so good, right? There's no real like lower time frame, whatever. I was just like, hey, this is XRP. It just kind of feels right, and then I just took the trade. And I did the same with Litecoin. In Litecoin, you can draw a diagonal.
Oh god, on the USD pair.
On the USD pair, it's a very long one. Starts December 2018.
Oh Jesus! The perp chart doesn't even go back that far on Binance, and even Coinbase Spot.
Yeah, or Litecoin USD on Binance also works.
Oh, I see. You're talking like the mega fucking trend line.
Yeah.
God,
and the one that we broke below. The one that we broke below.
No, we never broke below it because I've just redrawn it.
Yeah, but if you redraw it, it's less clean. I think we're trading below it, and we now are in the process of reclaiming it. I found like the Twitter, like the Litecoin intern, completely unhinged.
Yes, just hired some Zoomer to talk shit about Solana.
Yeah, I mean, perfect. Like that's exactly what you need to do. I legit like those two things combined. I was like, it's reclaiming that breakdown. I have mental illness, so I like to buy coins that I've traded a bunch.
Yeah, you can't get away from this thing, can you?
I mean, it's just like when you trade something, like it's like playing a game that you're very familiar with, right? You're just good at trading it, and like then you're just like, yeah, I could make more money trading Mudeng, but I also like would feel much less comfortable. And the chances of me winning on that are much lower, even if the reward is much higher. So I just took I like to trade the comfortable stuff where I'm like very in the know. I don't like trading stuff, and I mean this is just me being old guard of sorts, where someone just can decide like, hey, I'm just gonna sell like 5% of this coin because he bought like 3 weeks ago and it's up 500,000%, and he can just one clip 5% of the entire supply. And I bought like a bunch, and now I'm down like 80% in 10 minutes. And then maybe it reclaims all of it. But just generally, like this is very hard for me to kind of like identify those kind of risks on the newer coins. Whereas on like Litecoin, I know that, I mean, no sane person is holding Litecoin in that kind of percent range. And if they do, they're not going to sell it. Like not going to one clip sell it. So it's just like a comfortable kind of trade where I'm like, it makes sense. It's kind of funny. It's very, very out there. Like, I don't think people should necessarily copy trade me on Litecoin. I somehow never end up losing money on this thing. I always come out with something. It's almost always much less than other coins that I could have bought. But it's just like if you always win with something, even if you win less, then other people are winning at the same time. Like, is it that bad of a trade? I don't know. Probably
No.
still, but I'm fine.
There's something to be said for the familiarity there, because you can size up as well. The game you're playing. Target wise, obviously you won't make it there because you'll sell beforehand. And then
I'll
WhatsApp me at 2 a.m, being like, I can't believe I fumbled, etc., etc. What are you thinking? 130, 129, 130?
Nah, you go. So I let you draw the trend line, right?
Yes.
And now you cap it with a horizontal at 300, and then that's your target.
Wow. Okay.
And obviously, I'm going to sell much before that, but that's your target.
Aye. Okay. And invalidation for most of these, I'm guessing, is generally momentum oriented. Like if they start giving back their breakout candles, you're a bit like, or is it
like,
wider than
invalidation on most of these is just like if I don't feel it anymore.
Yeah, it's gut feeling invalidation. Very useful for the audience.
But no, it's basically just like momentum loss.
Yeah.
Or like just they go up too much, and I'm like, fuck it.
Start feeling sick.
Yeah. But just generally, I think it's more of a momentum kind of vibes thing. But as we speak, Bitcoin's actually reclaiming 90K.
Isn't that a hilarious sentence for us, especially with like trading BTC at 3-4K type of thing? And it's like it's reclaiming 90K is a hilarious sentence.
Completely insane. And I mean, it's funny because now that's like Bitcoin's like going up, you look through the altcoin landscape, right? And this is something that I've liked to do in the last few days, and just to kind of see which coins are good, which coins are bad. And you scroll through the Bitcoin pairs, and literally everything is just fucking nuking. I mean, that's kind of been the name of the game, right? Like the altcoins cannot keep up with Bitcoin right now.
Even at this market cap, that's the crazy part.
Like that's kind of insane. And that's a good sign for Bitcoin, I think. It's not necessarily the best if you're an altcoin holder, right? You're not having too much fun. Or like not as much as you could have, but just generally for the state of the cycle, when Bitcoin is this high and just walks along and has most of the strength, like the market gets much weaker to attack on any front if it's the altcoin leading.
Oh, of course. That's like when the borrowed time counter starts, when BTC is like anemic and it feels like it's being dragged up, or it just isn't doing shit and the rest of the market is just piling on risk on the back of BTC weakness. That's when it gets really scary. But the other way, it's one of those extremes where like it almost all the time, if BTC is like a piece of shit and everyone's piling on risk on alts, it's really bad for the market. But if BTC is really strong, then that's just like a safety cushion for the market as a whole, Like it's still so BTC centric for the most part.
But I mean, it's not going to help. Like, I think a lot of people are kind of sick and tired of it now, holding their altcoin that is up like 10, 15, 20% year over year. And Bitcoin's up like bajillion%. I think people are struggling with it now. Like, I think there's like a lot of pain.
Yeah, like look at .BTC, for example. Can we just take a look at that chart?
Yeah, and that's actually not one of like there's Jesus, okay, I just assumed that. I was like there's worse ones, and then I clicked on the weekly, and then
I just felt the need to demonstrate the example, like because a lot of people just index when we talk about altcoins, just think about like the hottest trench meme coin and say what the fuck are they talking about, like BTC performance. But these things had so much fucking mindshare in 2021 and still have a ton of holders for whom crypto equals like layer 1 carousel, right? Or crypto equals top 30, top 50 by market cap in like 2021 or even in 2024. This is we could also do Atom BTC, for example.
That's the one that I actually wanted to.
Yeah, like Atom BTC. This is the state of, I think, the classical definition of altcoins against BTC. Just to make clear, they're not sort of exaggerating how miserable this stuff is.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're holding Atom, you are literally like basically not up at all.
Yeah, I know. There's no bull market for you.
Like there's literally no bull market. Look at Atom USD on the weekly time frame. There's literally no bull market. Like there's nothing.
There's no market.
There was no bull market. Yeah. Like you are literally trading at price levels of 2021.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
So
yeah, the dispersion this cycle round is absolutely insane. 2017 was easier, Don. You know,
Oh
if
yeah,
it was, if you could trade it, it was up. You know.
yeah. The thing with 2017 was that there was much less coins.
Yes.
It's impossible to pump these. I mean, 2017 was already a lot of coins, but it's impossible to pump all of the coins that we have now.
Yes.
Like we have infinite, like literally in Pump Fun has like adds like infinite amounts of coins every single day, right? Like there's infinite coins, which means that like, I mean, it's kind of funny because that makes Bitcoin more valuable. Like the more coins you make, the more valuable Bitcoin becomes. And I think that's like a really good bull thesis for Bitcoin, because basically like it makes it so obvious that this is like infinite. Like the altcoin space is infinite.
Yeah, it's a hedge against crypto debasement now, not just monetary debasement.
and for some time it was like Bitcoin was actually struggling because there was like a few altcoins that were just like doing different things.
Yes.
And then they were stealing bit from Bitcoin away, right? Like, and you got like the old season and all that kind of stuff, because like, oh shit, like this, like ETH does this and that, and that's so much better than Bitcoin. Now, like every altcoin does this and that, and there's like 50 layer ones, a million layer twos, and you're like, okay, what the fuck? Which one do I buy? And then there's so much choice that you're just gonna be like, I just buy Bitcoin. Like it might not be as good in transacting as fast as Solana is, or it might not be as good as being a piece of shit like ETH, but at least like I know what the fuck I'm doing, and that there's no real competitor. I think it's actually like a really, really good bull thesis for Bitcoin. And I think like going forward, you're not gonna see, and there's something that we talked about in every single cycle that we've been in, that you're not gonna see Bitcoin be dethroned. And we've always gotten shit for it, right? Like especially bad in 2021 where people were like, ETH is going to dethrone Bitcoin. I don't think it's ever going to happen. At this point, like with every passing year, I think it becomes less likely, not more likely to happen. Bitcoin's just too dominant, and everything else is infinite in this space. So basically you trade everything to make more Bitcoin.
Return to tradition, 2017 style.
Yeah.
And I mean, BTC, all that stuff. Up in
there's
USD
obviously
is
gonna
fake.
there's gonna be opportunities in the altcoins, right? I'm not saying that's not the case, but I like back in the day I had a little bit of like, I was like, okay, Bitcoin could get overtaken, but I think like back then I made the argument that I think that would end crypto as we know it, just because we need that like that promise that something has value, right? Because whenever
the Lindy benchmark, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because the problem with ETH and Sol right now, for example, like people are making the argument that Sol should overtake ETH and whatever, but then something else can overtake Sol, right? And basically, what that does is it weakens the entire case for that area of the market. Like if you can take like overtake ETH, like the benchmark of like the smart layer of sorts, like the second big coin, and you just make a new one that is like that's faster, whatever. You can always make a new one and a new one and a new one, and that kind of takes away fundamental value, I think, from those, like from ETH and Sol. And Bitcoin doesn't have that, which is good, and I don't think it's ever going to have it. It's always going to be like Bitcoin at the top, which is a good thing. I'm glad we kind of sorted that out, because that was a little bit of a scary prospect of seeing Bitcoin get overtaken. I think would have destroyed basically a lot of faith, like long term in crypto, and I don't think it's a risk anymore.
Thank God for that. We've been going on for ages. I don't know if we want to go through like the altcoin list. It might be a bit too long.
Nah.
But I mean, XRP is your bag. I think in terms of mind share, Pepe and WIF, given the centralized exchange relistings, are back on the menu. Pepe, obviously, like mega all-time high breakout.
So, Pepe is much more interesting than WIF.
And I think there's like actually a really nice 4-hour cluster there, just under 2K, that still provides a decent proximity and validation lower time frame. What do you think?
Yeah, already did it on the 4
Already did it, yeah. But, you know, just looking at it now, that's really the only remotely reasonable area, and it's not like a catastrophically far distance now relative to where it would be invalidated if you're playing perps that tightly. On the WIF side, I think it's a bit less clear because you just had this daily push through. But I think, again, if it's a hunt for proximity and validation, this won't be sexy, but like 2.8, I think the breakout level is as good as you're going to get if you want like clear proximity and validation. Because then if you look at the 4 hour, there's just like a 4 hour cluster built on top of that, right? So that seems reasonable. And in terms of outlier strength, there's obviously like the all-time high breakout stuff like Mudeng. Realistically, what, like, if you look at how this thing's been marching up, respecting like basically every single cluster on the way up for some time now. Again, I think if this is one of those, I want a decent proximity and validation, and whether it gets there or not just determines how good my entry is. 42 to 47, 48 cents ish, basically the base of this impulse candle. That doesn't seem absolutely insane.
So far away though.
So far, yeah, that's what I mean. Percentage wise, you look at this thing and you're like, oh, that's like the level, but that's 16 to
30% almost.
Away. But also, this thing also moves like 30-40% a day. So in relative terms, it's not too.
You just take it smaller size. Basically.
Exactly, you take it
because that's size. What you can do, right? Like if you like my invalidation is 20% away, that's too much for me. Then you just have to size down and take the trade anyway.
Precisely.
Like if you take half your usual size, your invalidation isn't 20% away; it's 10%.
Yes,
and like that's just kind of like
study the alchemy of finance. Yeah,
yeah. But I mean,
I agree.
Like as stupid as that sounds, and like as much like everyone wants to just take max risk, but there's one way to kind of make sure you can still take trades even though they're very far away from.
It's the premium you pay for being late, so to speak.
Yes. I mean, if you're late, you have smaller size.
Yeah.
If you're early, you have bigger size. Just how it is.
Yeah, you get paid for being early. You know, GOAT AI meta is still pretty strong. There's a lot of it is transferred into like the really new coins. But
GOAT's actually really strong today.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's got this diagonal meme, right? And then it's got wicks into all-time high. So if there's, I think like a clearance thrust through there is watch list worthy. At least it's not like obviously dumb.
Actually looks quite good.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm kind of over it, the whole AI thing. I think it's so stupid. I mean, I was shilling GOAT like much lower. I didn't buy any of it.
Obviously, yeah.
Obviously, I mean, it's what
you were saying. I was like one of the few interesting bits and pieces, and the market's caught up to that. So I agree there. Bonk I don't find super interesting at the moment, at least compared to
everyone's shilling Bonk.
Not a huge fan. Brett, that's another meme coin that made it to centralized exchanges. Proximity and validation there wouldn't be anything sexy. No. I mean, if you had to put a gun to my head, maybe the pre-breakout cluster at 14 to 15 cents. That's like 12 to 20% away, but it's also something that's up 20% today. So you have to like adjust your position sizing for this type of volatility. But any type of, I mean, relative strength plus any type of all-time high breakout would be watch list worthy once again. What else have I got that I was looking at before the show?
I mean, ADA looks good.
ADA's, yeah. I mean, this kind of reinforces the boomer thesis, right? The altcoin 2017. ADA, yeah. I mean, it
fucking horrendous though. Like, don't buy it, please. Please, God, don't buy it. But it
57 cents is like a really clear, at least on the daily. Basically, the lowest close of this really ugly wiki consolidation, having cleared all the stuff that it's cleared, it really shouldn't be closing back below there if it's going to do an all-time high push, I think.
Yeah.
This consolidation should be the pullback if it's going to do another leg that led it here in the first place. But fucking ADA, Jesus Christ.
Yeah. If you look at the weekly, it's just very clean. And there's very empty, like there's a lot of empty space between like basically where we are, 0.6 and 1. There's really nothing on ADA.
Yeah, like 80 cents, maybe first trouble area or something.
And but I mean, that seems like, like
it's
that
been
seems good.
Yeah. I mean, animal coins kind of been basically jostling for attention with AI stuff. Like, I don't know if you saw Nero, the CTO version, NEIRO.
Yep.
I mean, that weekly chart doesn't look terrible. That's one of those, like, if that's not the bottom, then fuck it type of things. What do you think?
Yeah, it's kind of like, honestly, like everything kind of doesn't look bad.
Yeah,
it's just like you kind of have to pick the right one.
Exactly.
It's really hard right now to pick the right meta, because I think we're right in between metas right now.
Yes,
so we had the whole dog, cat, whatever the fuck. Now, like, I feel like with the whole XRP Litecoin thing, like there's a little bit of a meta shift where it's like old dump shit coins, basically.
Yes.
That's also getting some limelight, and you cannot underestimate like how strong they've been in the last 2 days, right?
Yes.
Like this is uncharacteristic.
Uncharacteristically strong.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. In like they've been shit. They've been horrendous.
Yeah,
shit
some of the
for
worst
years.
stuff. Yeah.
And then suddenly, like during like rough trading, because Bitcoin was going down, and people were actually like, and this is why it's interesting, like why those are interesting to me, because Bitcoin was going down, and people, I mean, everyone keeps talking about top signals on Bitcoin, right? Like, or just generally on the market right now. So what happens is basically people are afraid that they're buying the top. And then I looked at kind of what coins were strong and what coins were weak. And like stuff like WIF was really weak. Doge was really weak. Like a lot of these coins were like pulling back massively. And then you had like I said, like the old guard, like Litecoin, XRP, ADA, like those dog shit coins were actually showing strength, which I find interesting. So there's like another meta that could come, might not, right? Like this obviously can just stop. This can just be like 2 or 3 players just making a bet on which meta is going to win. And like 2 or 3 players bidding Litecoin and XRP and ADA and that kind of stuff might be enough for it to hold up better during a nuke. Like we had, like that could just all, or it's like just early into the meta, and then that was just the strong outperformance, and now you're gonna get more of that outperformance.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like wrestling for attention in this environment.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's like the cat coin, dog coin shit. Then there's like, I think, a distinct sub meta within that of non-cat, dog, animal coins. And again, it feels funny saying all this in person, but I genuinely think it's true. So it's like animal meta can be split up into cats, dogs, and then like other animals. Then there's the AI meta with some new centralized exchange listings recently. And then there's Coinbase, Robinhood relisting potential securities meta. And
that's the best one probably to trade. Like just from just not thinking, just aping. I think that's probably the best one.
Yeah, just like basically news trade plus momentum essentially on strong charts. And finally is the Boomer 2017.
Probably
on a roll.
Probably
meta.
The worst. But
oh dear. Well, also just like very quickly, Dob, we talk so much about this being the crime cycle, essentially running it up again. Yeah, you know, I've got the TRX chart open, Don.
Oh, fuck off!
I've been trying to get you to buy this thing for the last like 80% of its rally. Surely now. I mean, TRX is an all-time high, and crime is back on the menu. Is there a better thesis than that?
I mean, the USD pair looks really good. I like we talked about. Don't buy this, please.
Bro, look at the weekly trend on this thing. It's actually
yeah. I mean, it's crime. It's crime.
It was early to crime.
Yeah, I mean, it's always been crime. It's the OG crime coin. I mean, on the BTC pair, it doesn't really look that interesting. But yeah, everything else just kind of nuked on the Bitcoin pair. So the fact that this went sideways is quite strong. And the USD pair just looks insane. But don't buy this shit. Don't give Justin Sun more money.
Do you think in general doing like the approach you implicitly described of pick a meta, look at BTC pairs, know the trade-offs of strengths versus retests and trade that way is like a pretty decent blueprint for current conditions on alts? Yeah. Well, fantastic. I think we just solved it, mate.
I think you're almost only gonna print if you pick the right meta, so good luck with that. Like it's a 1 in 4, 1 in 5.
Great. I like those odds better than my usual trading odds, you know.
and then you also have to hope like that Bitcoin stays up. But I generally during sell-offs, and this is why I mean this it feels so dumb because these are literally the worst coins, right? But during sell-offs, like that's the best indication that you can get that there is interest in propelling something higher when it holds up, right? Like if the entire market is weak and like a sector is strong during that sell-off, that's the highest chance that sector is going to outperform. This is literally why I've been trading fucking XRP Litecoin, because that's been the sector that held up. And I think that's the best indication that you can get. It's not entirely 100% accurate because like I said, let's say I'm okay, I'm convinced Litecoin is just a misunderstood poor coin and it's gonna go back to its former glory, and I just put my entire net worth on this thing, right? Litecoin isn't it's not like a lot of people are trading Litecoin, right? And if I put a buy order of a couple million, on this thing, it's gonna hold up better than everything else during the sell-off, and you can even make it like you can make the Bitcoin pair moon without mooning the price, just by having a buy wall there, and there's not that many people that would dump into you realistically, right? So therefore, that could just be it. But from like what I looked at, I think like my personal choice is like these dog shit, dumb piece of shit coins that used to be cool and are now very much not. I think the back holders are pretty much cleared, so I'm not worried about the upside. The only thing I'm worried about is that it runs out of steam before it gets going. Like, because a lot of people are like, hey, you're trading XRP or like Litecoin or whatever, there's infinite back holders, right? I think there's not anymore. It's been long enough, but I could be wrong on that front.
We'll find out.
We'll find out. Yeah, we'll see. If I come back on the show next week crying, then you know that I bet wrong.
Excellent. Yeah, I think this is fairly thorough and comprehensive. We're grateful for all the comments last week. Let us know whether this week was helpful as well. Thank you to Wu, as always, for supporting us in the show. Don, thank you for your time, and have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you all next week.
Bye-bye.